At what was supposed to be a family meeting, my parents blindsided me. They sat me down with gentle smiles and desperate eyes, then asked me to hand over my $750,000 0 cents inheritance to bail out my brother Ryan from gambling debts he swore he didn't have. But they didn't know that I'd already moved every cent into a locked trust, untouchable and airtight. So I just sat there, calm as a quiet storm, while their plan unraveled in real time. They thought they were staging an intervention. Turns out, I was staging a reckoning. They thought I wouldn't find out. That's what still stings the most. Not the betrayal, not the silence, not even the smug look on my mother's face when she poured herself a second glass of Cabernet like it was any other Sunday dinner. It was the certainty in their eyes, the assumption that I would just roll over, like I always had. My name's Claire Youngson. I'm 29, no kids, no husband, and no apologies left to give. And this is the story of how my family tried to steal my future, right out from under me, and how I let them think they could, until I didn't. Growing up, I was always the afterthought. I wasn't the loud one or the golden one. That role belonged to Ryan, my older brother by 2 years, and my parents' living, breathing excuse to never look in my direction. Ryan could burn the kitchen down and they'd hand him a fire extinguisher with a smile. I'd bring home straight A's and get a pat on the head if they remembered. When Grandma Jensen died last spring, I grieved quietly. She was the only one who ever saw me. She knew about my art, my long walks after work, and the little ceramic shop I dreamed of opening one day. While my parents fussed over Ryan's latest crisis, another DUI, another late rent check, Grandma would send me handwritten letters with pressed wildflowers from her garden and advice scribbled in the margins. Take care of yourself, Claire. No one else will do it quite right. What I didn't expect was for her to take that sentiment one step further. A month after the funeral, I got a call from her attorney. He had a kind voice and an air of caution, like he was used to delivering news that exploded quietly. He told me that my grandmother had left me $750,000, 0 cents. Not the family, not to be shared. Me, just me. The will was crystal clear. The money was for Claire's dreams, not Claire's obligation. I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was trying to hide it, but because I knew what would happen if I did. In my family, money doesn't just change hands. It chains people together. It gets weaponized, twisted into guilt trips and passive-aggressive texts. I wasn't about to let Grandma's last gift become another rope around my neck. So, I took action. Quietly, carefully, I moved the money into a protected trust. I got advice from a friend who works in finance and made sure everything was locked tight. Airtight. Then, I waited. Sure enough, the storm came right on schedule. The voicemail from my father was cold and sharp, just like him. Claire, we're having a family meeting Sunday, 7 sharp, don't be late. No context, no warmth. Just that clipped tone I knew all too well. The one he used when Ryan had crashed something, lost something, or was about to beg for something he hadn't earned. I showed up that night wearing black, not as a statement, just because it was clean, and I didn't care enough to dress for the occasion. My parents' house looked the same as always, stiff leather couches, the faint scent of lemon cleaner, and the kind of silence that hums like a warning. Ryan was already there, slouched in a chair, flipping through his phone like he had nothing to worry about. My mother gave me a glass of wine I didn't ask for. My father said nothing, just gestured for me to sit, and once I did, the curtain lifted. It wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush. They started gently. We're concerned about Ryan, my mom began, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness she saved for manipulation. He's in a bit of trouble. The kind of trouble that requires family support. Ryan didn't even look up, just nodded along like this was all normal. Then came the pitch. They wanted me to loan him money. Not a little, everything. They had somehow found out about the inheritance, though they never said how. My guess? A leak in the lawyer's office. Or maybe Ryan's girlfriend got nosy. Either way, they knew, and they assumed I'd be quiet, assumed I'd be obedient, assumed I'd do what I've always done, hand over whatever scraps I had to keep the family peace. But they didn't know what I'd done with the money. They didn't know it was already protected, already out of their reach. So I sat there, sipping the wine I didn't want, listening to them spin stories about how Ryan was getting clean this time. How a fresh start would make all the difference. How Grandma wanted us to stick together. It was almost impressive, the way they twisted her memory like that. My father leaned in, eyebrows raised. So, you'll transfer it tomorrow, right? I smiled, just barely. No, I said, my voice calm as ever. I won't. Their faces, God, I wish I'd taken a photo. My mother's jaw dropped, my dad's face turned a shade redder, By the second, Ryan finally looked up, blinking like he was seeing me for the first time. "I've already taken steps to protect the money," I said. "It's in a trust you can't touch. Grandma wanted it to build my life, not bail out his." Silence fell like a hammer. Then came the shouting. My mother accused me of being heartless. My father called me a traitor. Ryan had no words for the first time in his adult life, just the stunned silence of a man who'd run out of second chances. But I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I didn't defend. Because, for once, I didn't have to. I stood, walked to the door, and left them there, sputtering in disbelief, grasping for control they no longer had. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt light. Like maybe, just maybe, I was finally free. Grief is a strange thing. It creeps in quietly, soft as snowfall, and settles in your bones before you even realize you're cold. When my grandmother Lily died, I didn't cry at the funeral. I cried 2 days later, standing barefoot in her kitchen, clutching one of her old teacups and realizing she was never coming back to fill it again. She had been the only one in our family who saw me, not as a burden, not as a backup, but as a person, a whole one. When her will was read, my hands shook. Not because I was nervous, but because part of me already knew what was coming. Grandma always said she didn't believe in equal shares when it came to inheritance. She believed in earned love. So when the lawyer cleared his throat and read that Lily had left her entire estate to me, $750,000, 0 cents in cash and investments, a modest lakefront home, and a few heirlooms with more sentiment than monetary value, I sat still as stone. No smile, no tears, just quiet, aching gratitude. My parents, Susan and Robert, were less restrained. "She must have been confused," Susan had whispered sharply, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the armrest. Claire barely visited her. "That can't be right," my father barked. "What about Ryan?" Yes, Ryan. The family son to whom we all orbited. My older brother, whose charisma could fill a room and empty a bank account. Gambling debts, failed business ventures, rehab stints are treated like vacations. But to Susan and Robert, he was just a little lost. Meanwhile, I, who paid my way through college, who held down 2 jobs after graduation, who saved, planned, and built, found it difficult. They tried to contest the will. Of course they did. But Grandma wasn't naive. She had worked with an ironclad estate lawyer who anticipated their every move. When that failed, they tried guilt. When guilt didn't work, they tried silence. And when silence didn't get them what they wanted, they tried what they always did best: manipulation disguised as a family meeting. It came in the form of a voicemail, short, clipped, no affection. "Claire, we're having a family meeting Sunday at 7, don't be late." And that was it. No please. No, we'd love to see you, just an order. But I'd known it was coming. Since the moment I inherited Lily's money, I'd been living with a clock ticking in the back of my mind, counting down to the moment they'd ask for it. I wasn't foolish enough to think they'd let it go. So I prepared, quietly, carefully. Before the meeting, I moved all liquid assets into an ironclad trust. Not just any trust, a legal fortress with walls thicker than their egos. I appointed my best friend Emma as the trustee. Emma, who had witnessed my parents' cruelty firsthand. Emma, who once got kicked out of our house for daring to call Susan's parenting selective. Emma, who would rather eat glass than hand over a dime to the people who made my childhood feel like a tightrope walk in a windstorm. Sunday arrived like a thundercloud. I showed up at the house in all black. Not out of drama, just practicality. Besides, it felt fitting. A funeral of sorts. The death of any illusion that this family had my back. Ryan opened the door, unshaven and unsteady. The scent of whiskey and arrogance clung to him like cologne. "Claire," he slurred, "glad you could make it." I stepped past him without a word. Inside, Susan and Robert were already seated, wine glasses in hand, expressions tight. They didn't offer me a seat, but Robert gestured toward one like he was hosting a board meeting instead of a shakedown. Susan wasted no time. "Claire," she began, her voice all butter and poison, "we've been talking. There's something important we need to discuss about your inheritance." Of course. Her tone dripped with that false warmth she reserved for condescending sales calls and conning relatives. The same tone she used when trying to convince Grandma to sell her home years ago to fund Ryan's business venture, which turned out to be a poker room above a liquor store that failed within 4 months. Robert leaned in, voice grave. "Ryan's in trouble, serious trouble. He owes money to the wrong people, dangerous people. We have to act quickly for his safety." I said nothing. Silence makes them nervous, always has, so they kept talking. "Your inheritance is just sitting there," Susan said. "It could fix everything. You'd still have the house. Ryan could get the help he needs." I finally spoke, my voice flat. How much? They perked up like vultures spotting fresh roadkill. 600,000, Robert said, as if it were a modest loan. Maybe more, with interest. To nearly all of it. Susan gave a little laugh, too high-pitched to be sincere. Don't be dramatic. You'd still have the house. You don't need all that money, Claire, not like Ryan does. And that was the moment something in me clicked. Not snapped, not broke, just shifted. I looked at Ryan. He was picking at his nails, uninterested. Like this wasn't about him, like I was being selfish for making him sit through this. And when he burns through this, too? I asked quietly. Silence. It was deafening. Because deep down, they all knew he would. Just like they knew I wouldn't. That's why they came to me. Not because I had more, but because I had enough to survive losing it. I stood slowly. Susan blinked. What? No, I repeated. You're not getting the money. None of you are. You'd let your brother die? Robert hissed. No, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm letting him live with the consequences. Susan's voice turned icy. You always were cold, ungrateful. No, I said again, softer this time. I just finally stopped lighting myself on fire to keep this family warm. And with that, I walked out. Not because I was angry, but because I was done. Done being the backup plan. Done being the emotional punching bag. Done pretending this was a family and not a slow-motion robbery dressed up in birthday cakes and Sunday dinners. I stepped back from the table, calm on the outside, seething on the inside. You know what's funny? I said, my voice quiet but razor sharp. I expected this. I knew you'd try something. That's why last week I moved every cent into a private trust. Legally locked, ironclad. You can't touch a dime of it. Ryan jolted upright like a kicked dog. You did what? I turned to him slowly. I protected what Lily left me. You think she chose me by mistake? You think she didn't know exactly who you were? Robert stood up too fast, his face flushed like a man on the losing end of a poker game. You ungrateful little... No. I cut him off. I'm done. Done pretending I owe this family anything. Done being the backup plan for your bad parenting and Ryan's poor life choices. I'm not your financial safety net. I'm your daughter. And I'm done letting you forget that. Susan's voice cracked like old porcelain. Claire, please. He's our son. He's your brother. Then maybe, I said, you should have raised him better. And with that, I left. I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I walked, controlled, quiet, proud. The air behind me was thick with stunned silence and shattered entitlement. I'd finally shown them who I was, and it terrified them. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, curled up on my balcony, and laughed. Not out of joy, but out of release. For once, I wasn't the disappointment. I was the reckoning, and they had no umbrella for the storm I had become. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd retreat, lick their wounds, maybe even reflect. But I underestimated just how far people will go when they think they're entitled to something that isn't theirs. The next morning, my phone had 43 missed calls. Susan, Robert, Rich Ryan, considering he hadn't reached out in months unless he needed bail money or a wire transfer. By noon, my inbox was bursting at the seams with dramatic subject lines. We didn't raise you to be this selfish. Your grandmother would be ashamed. Do the right thing. Family comes first. It was like they were conducting a psychological experiment. Which guilt trip would finally get Claire to cave? But they didn't know this version of me, the one Lily had believed in. The Claire who had been forged in silence, who grew up swallowing neglect like it was communion wine. That girl was gone. She died the moment I watched them circle Lily's will like vultures at a banquet. I didn't respond. Not that day. Not the day after. Then came the kicker. A certified letter arrived, thick, formal, and unmistakably signed by Robert Jensen. Inside, they'd laid it out, plain as day, a formal request to transfer $600,000, 0 cents, from my trust into a family account for the safety and protection of the Jensen family legacy. The gall. The audacity. I nearly choked on my soup from laughing so hard. But the last page? That's what lit the match. A legal petition. They were trying to have me declared mentally unfit to manage my assets. They planned to get a court to appoint them as temporary trustees, giving them access to every dollar Lily entrusted to me. They weren't just trying to steal from me. They were trying to erase me. That night, I called Emma, my best friend and the official trustee of my inheritance. She answered before the first ring ended. Let me guess, she said, grinning through the phone. The vultures are flapping." "You have no idea," I replied. "It's time." She didn't need to ask what I meant. "Nuclear?" "Nuclear," I confirmed. While they'd been plotting with lawyers and wine, I'd been building a paper trail. Every voicemail, every text, every passive-aggressive email is disguised as a family concern. Even that ridiculous letter about my mental fitness. I started documenting everything the day after Lily's funeral because I knew exactly who they were. And now I had what I needed. I wasn't content just protecting myself. I wanted them to feel the weight of their own cruelty. So I didn't just lawyer up, I staged a reckoning. Lily's old estate lawyer, Mr. Rowland, was a retired pit bull in a suit, graying, sharp-eyed, and loyal to Lily like she was blood. He'd once told me, "If you ever need to draw a line, Claire, I'll be there holding the chalk." And true to his word, when I sent him the folder, screenshots, voicemails, and the letter, they lit a fire in him. He came out of retirement just to help me burn the bridge I should have torched years ago. 3 days later, the cease and desist was ready. Formal, precise, citing financial coercion, harassment, and attempted fraud. But for me, it wasn't enough. A letter, that wouldn't rattle them. I needed a moment. Something they'd never forget. Something to make sure they'd never dare come near my peace again. So I sent out invitations, handwritten, from me. I told them I had news about the trust and requested they meet me at Lily's house. The very house they once mocked for being too old-fashioned, too far, too modest for people like us. That alone was bait enough. They arrived 20 minutes early, eager like pigs scenting slop. When I opened the door, their faces glowed with smug relief. Susan pulled me into a brittle hug that smelled like guilt and expensive perfume. "We're so glad you've come to your senses," she whispered. I smiled. Tight, cold, practiced. "Oh, I'm seeing things more clearly now." I led them to the living room, Lily's living room, the one with the dusty piano that no one had played since she died, the one with velvet cushions worn thin from decades of use and love. They sat like royalty returning to a throne they never earned. Ryan couldn't even stay seated. He paced like a man trying to outrun his mess. Then I placed the envelope on the table between us, like a quiet bomb. "This," I began, voice steady, "is a cease and desist from Mr. Rowland. Any future attempts to contact me about the trust, my inheritance, or Ryan's debts will result in a lawsuit. And yes, criminal charges are on the table." Silence. Susan's jaw slackened. Robert's face turned the color of raw meat. Ryan's eyes darted like a cornered animal. "You can't be serious," Robert snapped, his voice rising, like it always did when control slipped through his fingers. I tilted my head slowly, savoring the moment. "Oh, I'm dead serious. And just so you know, I've filed a counter-petition. If you try again to claim I'm mentally unfit, I'll walk into court with every voicemail, every email, every recorded word of you begging, threatening, and insulting me." I turned to Susan, my voice softer now, dangerous in its calm. "Including the one where you called me a cold-hearted bitch and said you wished Lily had left everything to Ryan because at least he knows how to be grateful." Her face crumbled. Tears welled, not the sad kind, the kind laced with rage and humiliation. Ryan finally spoke, his voice cracked and dry. "You destroy your own family over money?" I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Ryan, I destroyed the illusion. You did the rest." The room fell quiet again. But this time it wasn't silence. It was surrender. A full collapse of entitlement and manipulation, right there on Lily's carpet. They weren't a family anymore. They were just 3 people stunned by the realization that their favorite scapegoat had become their judge. I walked them to the door without another word. No hugs, no tears, no promises to talk later. Just the creak of hinges and the final click of the lock. And when I turned around, the house, Lily's house, felt different. Not like a relic of the past anymore, but like mine. A place no one could take. Ryan stood, fists clenched at his sides, like a schoolyard boy who'd just been told recess was canceled. "You're gonna let me get hurt?" he asked, like the words might guilt me back into the role I'd finally walked away from. "You think you're better than us?" I took a long breath, one that carried every wound I'd ever bandaged, in silence. "No, Ryan, I know I'm better, because I didn't squander every opportunity handed to me. I didn't lie, steal, and blame everyone else when it all came crashing down. I didn't treat the people who loved me like walking wallets. You're not the victim. You're a black hole, and I'm done feeding it." His face flickered. Anger, confusion, a flicker of shame, and then it was gone, buried under that usual entitled snarl. Robert stood next, arms crossed like he thought posture could still intimidate me. "We're your parents, Claire. You owe us everything." I stared him down, and for once, he blinked first. "What I owed," I said, voice low but steady, "I already gave. Years of pretending, of swallowing your favoritism and cruel little jabs, of financing your failures and never once hearing thank you. I paid in full. I don't owe you anything else." Then I turned to the door, my hand resting on the knob. "And just so we're clear, you are no longer welcome here. Not in this house, not in my life, not even in my voicemail inbox." I opened it wide like it was a curtain call, like the final act was coming to a close and I was the one drawing the drapes. "We're done, goodbye." They didn't move. So I gave them one more truth, one they wouldn't forget. I met each of their eyes and said, "Lily knew exactly who you were. That's why she left it all to me." Then I shut the door. Pardon. Behind it, chaos bloomed. Ryan kicked the porch rail. Robert cursed like a man who'd finally realized his grip had slipped. Susan cried loud, performative sobs that used to slice through my resolve like a blade, but not anymore. I walked into Lily's kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and turned on the old record player she kept by the window. Nina Simone's voice floated through the air, rich and defiant. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I swayed to the music, barefoot on the hardwood floors, and smiled. Because for the first time in my life, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. I wasn't the black sheep they painted me to be. I was the survivor, the legacy bearer, the woman Lily believed in, and they couldn't rewrite that no matter how loudly they screamed on the other side of the door. That day, I didn't just protect an inheritance. I claimed my freedom. They came into my life with greed in their eyes and guilt in their hands, convinced they could bully me into submission one last time, but they walked away with nothing. No money, no power, no access. Only bruised egos, shattered illusions, and the echo of a door that will never open for them again. And as I stood by the window, watching their car disappear down the gravel road, I whispered a quiet thank you to Lily. For the house, for the trust, and most of all, for seeing me. Not as their daughter, not as their scapegoat, but as her heir. If this story hit home for you, or reminded you of what it means to finally stand up for yourself, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you've ever had to cut ties to protect your peace, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. We read every single one. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this. Stories about courage, boundaries, and what it means to choose yourself. Until next time, take care of your heart, and never be afraid to close the door on people who don't deserve to walk through it.